This Week in Habsland. I am Jordan and he is Brian, and we are here this week to discuss the Montreal Canadiens. You can find us on social media at HabslandPod. Now, usual program reminder for the evil Sunday night games. They hate our recording schedule, so we're not covering the second Carolina game. We'll obviously talk about the first one. So, moving on from that, Brian, the Habs on Saturday night in one of their more, I would say, dominant wins of the season, officially surpassed their season point total from last season. And I think some people are now rightfully starting to ask the question of what is considered a successful season at some point. We've talked about winning a playoff round, at least making the playoffs, X, Y, and Z. So I was asked a hypothetical on Saturday night watching the game with some family. And the question was this: if you put this year's Montreal Canadiens, so the 25-26 Canadiens, versus last year's Washington Capitals, the 24-25 Capitals, who would win in a playoff series?
That's a great question. To answer the previous one about success, I think anything better than last season is success. So if they were to get to 6 or 7 games and still lose, I think that's success. And I think that's probably the right answer too, to your later question of how would they do against the Capitals. I think it would go to six games, maybe 7 games. The Habs may even have a chance to win it. If you look at them positionally, I think in net, they're either as good, if not better. And those of you saying as good, we had Montembeault, and that's what's going on. This was a different Sam Montembeault until he got hurt. You know, he went on a bit of a tear at the end of last season and looked quite good in the playoffs before he unfortunately got hurt. Now, Dobes is on something of a tear right now, so that maybe that's a wash, or even Dobes is a little better. And then you have Fowler backing him up, who lately has looked fantastic. And we will absolutely get to him at one point. On defense, I think it's a similar group. It's a slightly younger group now that Savard is gone. And I think the guys at the top are just that much better than they were last year. Dobson is huge for that. Hudson is on a whole other level. Like, I think defensively they're better. And then at forward, it seems like they've really figured out the 4 lines and how they operate. And they're operating at a more playoff level. And the team has gotten meaner. They're defending in front of the net. Hudson was just in an abysmal mood after Fowler got run over last night. So you know what? I like the Canadiens' chances. The more that I just sort of in real time talk about this to you right now, the more I think they might have a shot to beat last year's Capitals. What was your answer when you got asked this?
I'm not sure I actually made a full commitment one way or another. But it's really about, like, it's 2 things at once. Defining success is, at what point is results more important than process? Because from a process standpoint, I mean, it's what you're saying. Like, yeah, they're going to be better. They would be more competitive. Whether it would be enough to beat the Capitals, I don't know. But that certainly is better. At what point in this team development cycle is cool, that's great, but you need to start winning playoff rounds? I don't think we're at that stage yet. And that's what I was trying to argue. Like, the season is not a failure if you don't win a playoff round. It would be incredible. And I think everyone would take that right now. I said, if we win a playoff round and then get smoked in round 2, that's still a resounding success this year. But it's also like, if this team finishes with 102 points and gets bounced in 6 games in the first round, some people will say that's not enough progress. Even though we look at the team year over year, the final result is, based on your point of view, the exact same, even though regular season wise, they will have gone much, much better. But from a team development standpoint, they are better. And we're going to get into like the meaner stuff, because that's where something's happening there. And so interesting question. They're at 92 points now. By the way, Habs officially hit the over of 91.5. So Brian, we are now 4 for 4. Shockingly.
Who'd have thunk it? I mean,
like, I think basically every year, because the last 3 years now has been the over, and it's been a pretty comfortable over. Our first year we did this, we pounded the under, and that never really, I don't think we ever sweated that one out. I think it was a good 5 or 6 points under. Looking forward to going 5 for 5 next year. That's all
I'm curious to see when do the odds makers recognize that this team is turning into the real deal? Like, it seems like everybody else has. All the pundits are talking about the Canadiens as like the next beast in the East, and how Canadiens Sharks will be a crazy series in the final in like 2029. So it's curious when you look at how they haven't adjusted yet. But anyway, the other thing to jump to in this conversation of like, are they better? Would they do better? Is this enough progress? all season we were asking ourselves the question, what happens to this team? What does this team look like when they actually have average, if not better than average goaltending? And they've won 4 straight. That's the difference. Clear as a bell. You know what I mean? And we're talking about process, we're talking about results. And so I'm jumping to a results-based thing. So maybe we could put that aside. But in terms of the way that the team is playing and the confidence that they're playing with and the fact that they're getting opportune saves and then turning around and going up on a rush chance and Demidov is ripping a shot off the post and in. It makes a monstrous difference. Fowler and Dobes playing the way that they're playing lately makes a massive difference. And so I think the team would also be going in with a heck of a lot of confidence if they were to be entering the playoffs right now. And thankfully, the playoffs are 10 games away. We're 10 games out. You know, by the time you hear this, we'll be 9 games out. And hopefully that's a win against Carolina, but let's not get into it. Anyway, all this to say, I like their chances.
Yeah, I mean, the part that I'm really enjoying now, and hopefully people can get some joy out of this, it's the discussion on results versus process. Like what matters more right now? And this is we are at the stage where it's like it's transitioning. And find the joy in the discussion, people. Don't just get angry at one another for like, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. I think we're kind of in a nice sweet spot of it's both.
Right.
It really is both right now. Okay, headlines. Let's go. I'll jump in first. My headline, it moved around as it usually does. It's kind of a moving target, especially when you're so close to the end of the season and every game is basically the biggest game of the season until the next one. So I moved it around a bit. I landed on this. My headline is about last Saturday. And I'm not talking about the Predators game. I'm talking about the Islanders game, which we obviously already covered. I want to come back to this one because I think this game really has potential when we look back at it and say, hey, that was an inflection point. This was the team turning the corner, the team evolving. And sometimes it's not easy to pick it up when it happens. Like last year's team, we kind of view it as like there was those moves in December with Primo down, Dobes up, Carrier trade, Barron out, on and on. The Hudson promotion to power play, all the stuff we talked about last year. And then they go on a run there, right? End of December, early January. And it was like a good 2-week stretch where we're like, hey, they've morphed. This year's team, we were talking about post-Olympic, like I don't know, man, there's something off. There's something wrong. And look, the Monty decision happens and he's slowly phased out, but fully phased out now in the last 2-3 weeks. So that could obviously be in play here. But I think something happened last Saturday and I just want to really come back to it. This game is 3-3 at the beginning of more or less at the beginning of the third period. We give up, I think it's probably, I'm going to guess a Schaefer goal, early third period to make it 3-3. After we grab the lead back, remember that game is 2-1 New York going into the, after a decent first period. And then New York kind of blows the doors off of the Habs the first 10, 12 minutes of that second period. And we're like, what the heck is going on? Habs claw back, get their goals. There's the huge Newhook goal that like really breathes life into the team. They concede. It's 3-3 at the beginning of the third period. And then stuff happens. Like we eventually blow them out. It becomes 7-3. It should have been 8-3. Patrick Waugh hates Zach Bolduc. And I think one element there, and it was something I think clearly the players heard about it. And clearly I think the coaching staff saw it too, of like, you guys need to be tougher. You guys need to be, it's really about like not sticking up for each other. That was never really in question, but more just like, put this into part of your game of incorporate a bit more toughness, a bit more physicality. It's guys like Bolduc and Texier and Jake Evans to an extent, understanding the assignment of like forecheck, hit, forecheck, hit, forecheck, hit. It's Caden Gooley. Like this like 2-week stretch here has come with Gooley's best stretch of hockey, probably in his career. It's Gooley having huge hits early on in that game. And then the big moment is Gooley standing up for Suzuki, rushing in 60 feet to go take Matthew Barzal out of a scrum. And we saw that continue this week, right? There's Jake Evans running in on Thursday when Lane Hudson's getting, I think it's Miles Wood, is trying to give Lane Hudson the business near the Blue Jackets bench. Jake Evans is like not having it. You already mentioned, or maybe it was right before we started recording, the goalie interference on Saturday night with with Jacob Fowler, and Lane Hudson gets in there and he was like, no, not my goalie. This team is doing this now, and it's very quickly become muscle memory of we stick up for each other, we hang together. And that inherently makes the team a bit more difficult to play against because there's going to be more, like they're still a smaller team. But I just, looking back on last week's game and then how it's kind of transitioned into this week, and there's still stuff they're not doing well. The power play had a rough game on Tuesday. The opening goal against Carolina. The Carolina game in general is weird. The fire alarm at the end of the Columbus game was a train wreck. Like they actually recovered very well in Columbus. Versus Columbus at home. And the Caulfield missing those 2 opportunities in the third was almost weird. And then the fire alarm at the end. But like mostly that game, they were pretty good. But there's something coming together, I think, with these last 3 games that we can start to point back to that Islanders game of something maybe changed here. And maybe it was like proof of concept of like, hey, if we do play this way, and like the coaching staff's like, hey, try to play a bit more, box guys out, Noah Dobson specifically, which he's been doing, in front of the net. When you're in the quarter, take the body. Your other guy will take it. If you're on the forecheck, go hit someone. And slowly, this is muscle memory and the wheels are turning and they're all starting to play a bit better. So that's kind of what I've been seeing. Like thinking back to that Islanders game, and then 3 more straight. And you mentioned 4 straight wins, 4 straight regulation wins too. Now, it's not all the Atlantic teams anymore, which would have been nicer against Boston and Detroit, but hey, we'll take it, right?
Of course, you take points any way that you can get them at this point, and you take a better process at this point too, which we were talking results versus process. When both are perfectly aligned and you like what you see with the eye test and the scoreboard also confirms that they're playing the right way, that's the dream. That's the dream of any coach when the things start aligning and things start going your way. 1 goal against, 2 goals against, 3 goals against. These are the last 4 games since the Islanders game. Prior to that, we had lost to the Sharks. They scored 4. We lost to the Ducks. They scored 4. So it's also a tightening up of the defense. And I think it's interesting when you look at those 4 games preceding the 4 good ones that we've just had. The loss to the Red Wings, the loss against the Ducks, the loss against the Sharks. There's a win against the Bruins in there that I almost want to put aside because the Habs always wake up for a home game against the Bruins. But there was a stretch there where all of Habsland was panicking, absolutely panicking. What are we going to do? We're going to be out of a playoff spot in a few games if they keep playing this way. And suddenly everything starts to tighten up. And so the other thing that I want to point to here of like because I do think there's an inflection point around then. I don't know if it's specifically the Islanders game. I've got my own hunch as to where it is that I'm going to go into in my headline after. But let's assume that it is. The other thing that happened in that Islanders game was Cole Caulfield scored a hattie, and the top line was just absolutely ridiculous. They had been good for a while. They had been really good for a while, and one of the only things that was going well. But they became the best line in hockey again, at least for a game. And then they've been one of the best since then. But then it also requires that in a game against I believe it was the Blue Jackets game, where it wasn't Slavkovsky, it wasn't Caulfield on the scoreboard, it wasn't Demidov. It was Xhekaj Struble scoring his first goal in a year and a half since November 2024, and it was Zach Bolduc making up for the Patrick Roy hatred that you talked about. Like he scored one, he made up for it, and that was from Jake Evans with the primary assist. Bolduc also had the primary assist on Struble. So it's not just the top end talent getting it done either, even though they've woken up and have been phenomenal. Even though Dobes had a 962 in that game, they don't win unless Struble puts the puck in the net and unless Bolduc puts the puck in the net. So it's a combination of so many factors, but it's clear as day that this is a different team than they were on that California road trip.
Yeah. I'm gonna kick an idea to you. It's not fully formed. I noticed this during the Columbus game, and I want to know your thoughts. So I'm wondering if, because that was a slow start game, right? I think it's like 13-4 the shots.
Similar
at some
to Carolina.
Points. It's 8-1, I think, really. Yeah. So that's why it was 2 games in a row. Now, Carolina is a different one. Carolina's only had a lower than 50% Corsi, I think 4 games this season. So like Carolina, we know it. They rip bombs from the point. That's so a bit of an outlier, but not necessarily. Okay, so I was wondering, is this team like, because like Columbus had a bunch of shots in the first. I can't say there was a lot of like, oh my God, I can't believe. Like Tuesday night with Dobes, there's the breakaway on Taylor Hall right away. And it's like, oh my God, thank God it keeps it at 1-0. Whereas Thursday night, I didn't notice the Jackets have like grade A opportunities despite having a lot of shots on goal. And I'm wondering if like And part of the two is like the slow starting
Right.
offense that the Habs have. What I've been thinking about is like, are they just really trying to focus on to start the game? Let's be sound defensively in the tough spots, and then slowly build out from there. This is like eye test
Yeah.
completely, right? And I have no data to back this up, but I'm wondering if that's the case. If they're like, okay, we're going to start the game, we're going to be a bit cautious to start, kind of like a game one playoffs vibe, right? Where like you're just doing almost like a feel out of what's going on. But are they starting the game like that of like, we're going to be composed in our own zone. We're going to be careful with, they've been better with the zone exits the last few games. That's for sure. And that means when you like getting to your offense, unless it's in transition, is going to take a bit more time to like rev up. And that's why we see them flip a switch in the second period, whether it's late in the second against the Islanders, early in the second against the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Nashville game was whatever, because like Nashville was a perfect non-trap game, by the way, because Nashville was like, oh my God, they've won so many games. And then you check who they've beaten. You're like, that's great. They haven't beaten anyone useful. So that was like, you can't get trapped in that because they're like a fake good team. But anyways, now I've been kind of wondering that, like, hey, is it something where the coaching staff is like, don't worry about the offense to start the game. Let's make sure we're playing well defensively. And the way these Canadians go, like they give up point shots. They're not very good at covering that. And your goalie is getting better at stopping them. But it's like the high danger stuff, the slot stuff. Let's like keep a lid on that. Let's try to minimize turnovers in your breakout, and then we'll figure out the offense. This is pure eye test. This is kind of what I've been wondering or thinking, Brian. Have you seen anything like that? Or like, is there any validity to what I'm thinking?
Yeah, I think you're pretty spot on with that idea, Jordan. It was kind of clear as day against the Blue Jackets, against the Hurricanes, who, like, the Blue Jackets had been on something of a tear. I think they had won 5 of 6 when they were coming into that game, 6 of 8 when they met up against the Canadiens and playing some pretty good hockey. Hurricanes have been playing good hockey all year, and similar in the way that both of those games started, in that tons of shots produced by the opposition. The Canadiens really couldn't produce much. But it didn't seem at any point like the Blue Jackets or the Hurricanes were really putting on high danger scoring chances or anything like that. So I think the argument that like the team closes down, makes sure the defense is sound prior to taking any type of risks, I think you're dead on with that. I think that's probably the exact thing that's occurring right now. And then the team is skilled enough that even if they're not taking risks, they're not attempting anything in the first period, 40 minutes is more than enough time to capitalize on a bunch of opportunities. And obviously, like, there were goals prior to that, but it's more than enough time to capitalize on opportunities. And then I wonder also if there's an element of like lulling the opposition into a false sense of security. Like, we're not attacking back, we're not countering, we're not taking risks. So the opposition sits in this groove of, we can just keep peppering with shots and taking risks, and they're not going to do anything. We could just sort of, it's almost like the Habs are playing possum with it. And it's working. I mean, you can't argue that it's not working. It was nice in the Predators game that they didn't have that similar like 15 shots to 3, or I don't remember the exact numbers, but a crazy amount of shots against and none for. In the Predators game, it was pretty much the opposite. The Canadiens were producing a lot. They were in control entirely of that game, and the Preds just couldn't claw their way back in. But when you're playing a better opponent, like the Blue Jackets have been playing, like the Hurricanes have been all year, I think lulling them into a false sense of security and also just shoring up your defense to start, it's a really good strategy. And also, like, I'll confirm it with this. Like, Marty on multiple occasions has said that his philosophy in general is to shore up the defense before even thinking about anything offensive. Like, we have to be good in our own zone, we have to be good in the neutral zone, and then we tackle the offensive zone. And until those first two things are solved, we don't start thinking about the offensive zone at all. And considering that the two, I think, you know what, I'll call it the 3 major issues of this team all year. Goaltending seems to be better now. The defensive lapses, if you're taking care of your defense first and then worrying about the other things after, you're in good shape. And then also that second period thing that we were talking about last week. If your first period is just so solid and you don't come into a deficit at all, you don't have to take risks in the second. And when they present themselves to you, you're almost like, it really is like you're playing possum. You're waiting for opportunities. And those of you who remember the, mid 2000s, the early 2010s, of that's all the Canadiens did, and it was boring as hell. At least now, when the opportunities present themselves, the Habs can cycle for multiple minutes and get multiple chances and make the opposition pay.
I think I'm not sure it's playing possum, but I think another thing you mentioned is probably the right way to look at it is they need to basically have their house in order, and once that's good, they can start attacking. And we saw in the Nashville game, it didn't take very long to do that. But in the Columbus game, not never really happened in Carolina, but certainly the Columbus game, it took a period before they wound up. Um, okay, so I want to move on because we have quite a bit more to get to. I would be remiss if we didn't at least mention Demidov elevating in the past week and playing a really, really good, three games of hockey, including some lovely goals. Certainly the 4-2 goal on Tuesday night against Carolina, and then kind of correcting his earlier miss. I think it was blocker side on Saros on Saturday night as well. So I'd be remiss if we didn't mention Demidov. Because I know your headline, Ryan, which we'll get into now, is dealing a bit more with the fringes of the roster. So before we got to that, I just wanted to give a shout out to Demidov, but no, I'll throw it back to you for your headline.
Yeah, so my headline is 6-7 resolved. And I'm, of course, referring to the defensive depth chart, let's say, where the 6 and 7 spot was, Xhekaj, Struble. At one point, it might have been Engstrom. People have been talking about Reinbacher, and all year we were like, okay, someone's got to grab the bull by the horns and give Martin St. Louis the confidence to just include that guy in the lineup over and over and over again and forget about everybody else. And it seems as though that had happened. So you talked about the inflection point being a handful of games ago. And I think in the way that you were looking at it was like game 69, the Islanders. I think it was a couple games prior to that, honestly. So that's why I said I wasn't sure about the starting point. I think it was the game against the Bruins, because against the Bruins, that's when Marty put in Xhekaj Struble as the sixth defenseman, and he has not looked back since. It's the longest period of time, and I'm doing this specifically between Struble and Xhekaj, because like we've talked about Carey, we talked about other guys, but the top five guys are basically in their spots, and yeah, they move around in terms of where they are in the lineup, but they're not coming out of the lineup. Carrier is not being healthy scratched. It's been Struble, it's been Xhekaj all year, and it was, Gooley when he was hurt, or Mike Matheson missed a game or two. So what we're seeing lately, the past 6 games that Struble has been in, so games 67 through 72, that's the longest stretch where either Xhekaj or Struble has been in games without the other one. The longest stretch prior to that was games 52 through 56, so whatever, a little over a month ago. And that was Xhekaj actually getting the nod. And Xhekaj got the nod, I think, more than Struble for most of the season. The proof is that he's played 55 games now, and Struble's only played 49, and that includes the past 6 that Struble has played. So in terms of the deployment of like who Marty is giving the nod to, I think it's becoming clear as day that Struble is his guy. And then you combine that with the fact that who is Xhekaj Struble playing with recently? He's playing with arguably the most important player on your team, definitely the most important defenseman. He's been playing with Lane Hutson. You don't put a guy who you don't have faith in with your best defenseman, maybe your best player, one of the best defensemen in the league, unless you're absolutely convinced that he's not going to be to the detriment of that player. And I think eye test confirms, results confirm he has not been to the detriment of Lane Hutson. So first of all, like, you don't have to speak to the my alteration of your turning point, like when did things actually turn around, when is the inflection point here. It's within 2 or 3 games of each other for varying reasons. That doesn't matter. What interests me more is, like, do you believe that Marty has set this in stone now and that it's not going to change for the rest of the season? Yes, Xhekaj might get into a game or two, but it's Struble's position now. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's been a decision made here, and it also trickles down to Reinbacher of, okay, we're going with Struble as the number 6 guy here down the stretch over Xhekaj and over potentially David Reinbacher. I mean, I would certainly push back on this having a big impact. Like, I think shedding Montembeault has been a much bigger deal than bringing in Xhekaj Struble. I think there's also an argument to be made that, like, Lane Hutson has not been Lane Hutson over the past 2 weeks. And part of that is because he's had to go back to the right side and he's playing with a lesser defensive partner. So I think there is a trickle down effect to getting every, like, look at these last couple games here. Lane Hutson has not been the star of the show, which is fine. Again, you want to see the depth come up a little bit, but he's been a bit more in the background, and I think him playing on his offside is contributing to that. And I don't think Xhekaj Struble is the perfect match for him. Ultimately, like, a decision needed to be made at some point, and we've kind of seen all year more trust in Struble than in Xhekaj because of the Gouli injury. Both of them got a ton of game time in the first half of the season. Now that Caden Gouli is back and playing well, it's become a decision of who's in and who's out. And Struble being in, yeah, sure, it is what it is. I still don't like. I'm not sure it's as a stabilizing factor as maybe you're making it out to be, but also like it that doesn't negate the fact that it is kind of like the current kind of settling on this defensive core for this year. So look, you can look right at, was it Thursday night where Struble scores the first goal and then is essentially the reason they concede the first goal. And I think him and Hudson, again, Hudson on his offside with the pinching, like it's been a bit up and down. So
Right.
I agree with the fact that, like, yeah, a decision has been made of Struble over Xhekaj and Struble over anyone from Laval possibly coming up. That has been set in stone. And there's like, I think there was evidence building over the year. There was like just enough trust in Struble with that's how you use him. I wish it wasn't with Lane Hudson. I wish Hudson would go back with Noah Dobson. I don't know what that means downstream. Like, do you try Gouli and Matheson and then you kind of stick Struble Carrier together? Like, I don't know if that works, but it's an imperfect solution. But you know what I mean? Like, it's, yes, 6 and 7 has been kind of settled, but it's still not great. It's the lesser of two poor options.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. What it does allow for, we've been seeing some Gouli Carrier lately, and if you look on Money Puck at the NHL line stats, so the expected goals percentage based on the pairings, they're the third best behind Matheson Hudson, who's number 1, and then Hudson Dobson. So right there also we see, hey, there's two better options there for Hudson. Matheson Hudson and Hudson Dobson are both at 62% expected goals percentage. It then drops to 58.4 for Gouli Carrier. Hudson Gouli is also a better option. Hudson Carrier is great. Oh, wait, you know what I'm realizing? It's just Hudson with anybody is pretty good. Yeah, and Hudson Struble is 50.5%. So certainly much less than basically any other Hudson pairing with anybody else. Part of the reason that I wanted to look at this was as I was kind of tracking the ins and outs, I noticed that in games where both Xhekaj and Struble were in, the Canadiens had less success. Surprise, surprise, that should be obvious. But then when only Xhekaj or only Struble is in the lineup, there's kind of a drastic difference in terms of the results too. So when they were both in games, and this again is, Matheson was out for a handful of games. Gouli was the main one who was out for a bunch. So right at the beginning of the season, games 6 through 21, both guys were in, and then they were in a bunch later in different stretches. When they're both in, points percentage for the Canadiens, 547. So they were 14, 11, and 7 in those games. If it's only Xhekaj in the lineup, 0.630. So getting a little bit better, about 80 points better in terms of points percentage, 12, 6, and 5. When it's only Struble, Jordan, over 3/4 of the possible points the Montreal Canadiens are getting, 13, 4, and 0. And of those 13 wins, 11 were regulation wins. They didn't need overtime. They only needed overtime to win 2 of those. So 765 when it's just Struble in the lineup. So I think I probably agree with you. Maybe I was a little hasty in saying that like Struble and Hudson is a pairing that is working and should stay together. Maybe I'm not seeing the forest from the trees by saying that. And, we could debate that at a later time. But what is clear as day is that Struble in the lineup versus Xhekaj in the lineup, the results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And so maybe at this moment we could speak to what a better organization of the 6 guys would be. Because like you mentioned that Hudson Dobson could go together. So would that then mean, so Hudson Dobson together, so you would put probably Struble Matheson, Struble Gouli, Struble Carrier. What would be the bottom 4 then?
I mean, Gouli and Matheson are so much better than the other guys that I think when push comes to shove in the big games of the season, like if there's a home ice versus non-home ice choice at the end of, game 81 or game 82, or if it very much, maybe it comes down to just making the playoffs, or maybe it's game 1 or game 3, first game at home. I think you put Gouli and Matheson back together with Gouli on the right. Those are your 4 best guys. Play your 4 best guys a truckload of minutes and do whatever you can. At least you have a lefty righty pairing for your third pairing with Struble and Carrier. I'm fairly certain those numbers are kind of whatever, but if you can guard, like, you know what I mean? I'm thinking battle mode, right, Brian? I'm not thinking 82 games.
Yeah.
Let's pace it out. We
Yeah.
are in the end of March. It's April. That's kind of how we have to think about it. Like, I don't know if I would give you that answer for like, it's the, November 17th. How do you want to do it? Because the answer would be go get someone else. But for what it is right now, it's Hudson, Dobson those are your studs. Follow them. Caden Gooley's playing the best hockey of his life. Mike Matheson has had such a great bounce back year. That's your second pairing. And from that point onwards, like if you can get a Carrier Struble pairing to get 10 minutes at 5-on-5, you're winning, I think.
You said the numbers are probably meh. They're actually the worst two pairings of the Money Puck only tracks for 50 minutes or more in terms of pairing time, guys playing together, which I think is right because, you don't really care about less than that. It's too small a sample size. These sample sizes are small. Struble Carrier has been a line or a pairing, I should say, for 92 minutes, almost 93 minutes this entire season. Matheson Gooley for about 150 minutes, so that's a better sample size. 37.8 expected goals percentage for Struble Carrier, 31% for Matheson Gooley. So really not great numbers at all. The Matheson Gooley one is very surprising to me, though you could absolutely factor in that those two dudes only really played together when things were not going as well, when the goaltending was pretty bad. So that's absolutely a factor. So I don't know. I might think that Matheson, Carrier, Gooley, Struble might be a better organization, but I can't argue the fact that like you put your top four as your four best guys, and then you have your third pairing. If the top four guys are able to play 24, 25 minutes each, something crazy, then you only give like 8-10 minutes, whatever, to your bottom two, and then they get penalty kill time and whatever else. And then the other big factor that we're leaving out here is, yes, these have been the pairings recently, like Matheson, Dobson, Struble, Hudson, Gooley, Carrier. But what's occurring all game long is, actually, you know what? Struble, ride the pine. I'm sending out Hudson to go play with Gooley for a shift. That's happening all the time. Right, where he ends up sitting one of Carrier or Struble in order to get the big boys out there more often. So it's kind of happening anyway. But all this to say, it's working at least in terms of the results. We said the eye test is touch and go, but we're getting the results, which is very nice. It would just be nice to have now that the 6 guys are consolidated in terms of who it is, maybe the next 10 games is Marty ascertaining, okay, these are the actual pairings that I want for the postseason. And perhaps it's a matchup thing too. Maybe if we face the Lightning, or if we were to face the Blue Jackets, or if we were to face the Sabre, like depending who you're playing, maybe the pairings differ. There could be an element of that as well.
Yeah. The only hesitancy I have with and I actually think it's the right idea of maybe you keep the existing duos together and then come playoff time, you're skipping a Carrier shift and skipping a Struble shift. The only thing is that you probably, if you're going to keep the existing pairings, you probably don't want Lane flipping from left to right mid period. I would presume that's rather discombobulating. So they'll have to be careful with that. I think, broadly, a lot of this rebuild has just been removing the weakest link. And I think that's what your headline's really getting at too, of the past couple years, it's been okay, you have to just remove this player, remove that player. The Montembeau discussion was all of that. Xhekaj Struble is the same. The 6th defenseman, and to a larger extent, the 5th defenseman as well, is removing the weakest link. And now we're at that time of the year, and what the discussion we're about to jump into in part 2, we're going to talk about some defensemen as well. Man, defensemen are playing a lot of minutes these days. So you have 3 horses that can play 25 minutes a night, I have no doubt. So when it comes down to it, I think pushes in to come to shove, and it's going to be it'll be a 12-minute game or a 10-minute game for Jayden Struble when the biggest moments happen, and it's best deploy your 3 best guys. And if Gooley is stepping up and saying, hey, me too, I don't think he can get the 25 without any power play, although I guess Mike Matheson's proving me wrong there. But yeah, I think it's you might have 4 guys, and those 4 guys, you end up just going Nashville 2017, and you have 4 guys playing 23 minutes a night, and maybe that's the solution.
Which, how do you argue against that? It just makes complete sense. When Carrier and Struble are clearly the weakest links at this moment, I don't think that you could argue against that strategy. One last thing that I'll say about Xhekaj, because I think it's really the only reason that he was in the lineup all year at all, other than the fact that Struble was inconsistent, but they both were. The only reason I think Xhekaj got the nod a little bit more, you never questioned his meanness. You never questioned whether he was going to punch a guy in the head for coming close to Fowler or Dobes or Monty. So now that the entire team is doing that as a unit, And even little Hudson is jumping at guys and you know, he has to jump up just to get a connection with his right hook. Now that everybody's doing that, the need for Xhekaj in the lineup is lessened. Not to mention that Struble will go, Anderson will go. There's a few guys in this roster who will fight and who will defend guys, but everybody's doing it as a unit now.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main factor in that. Those who are pining for Xhekaj to come back for his physicality and all those things, you almost don't need him anymore. He's become superfluous.
Yeah, and I also think he just wasn't on the ice enough to be that effective. And that's a completely different discussion, and maybe that's an off-season one that we'll dive into, because I don't think it's over quite yet.
Well, it's certainly going to be an off-season discussion, because the amount of NHL caliber defensemen, I mean, we've done this 3 years straight, maybe 2 years straight, where enough young dudes come up and you go, all right, well, you can't fit 12 defensemen on your roster, so you got to get rid of somebody. I think that's coming quick.
Yeah, it's going to be part 3, right? They've moved Harris, they've moved Kovacevic, they've moved Barron, they've moved Mailloux, Savard retired. Like, they've moved guys out, and there needs to be another exodus. Okay, enough of that. Part 2 of the episode, Brian and I were talking about how, and it kind of like last week, where it's like, there's only so much Habs we can talk without truly going over the same stuff over and over again. And I maybe had some Zach Bolduc stuff to go over, but I think that can wait another week, Brian. Like, where the team is right now, it's very much game to game. But I feel like from broadly, I think we covered it in this first half hour. So what we're going to do for part 2, something a little bit different. We're going to talk about our Hart Trophy favorites. So what Brian and I have prepared is each of us have a top 10. Now, I know the voting is a top 5. Truthfully, I think the top 5 would be a little bit boring, because there's a pretty strong consensus, I would guess. Probably the top 5 is a consensus, truthfully. After that, it gets really fun, really open. So we're going to do a top 10 for Hart Trophy finalist. And so there's a couple things, like there's a couple individual guys, Brian, before we get into the list itself, that I probably want to dive in on. But before we get to that, this is the Hart Trophy. The Hart Trophy is the most valuable player award.
Right.
How are you defining most valuable? Because this always comes up every year. What is the difference between best and most valuable? How do you weigh team success versus team dependence? So you tell me, Brian, when you're coming up with this, with your top 10 ranking, how are you defining MVP?
It's multiple things. I think it's sort of the success of the team weighed against the importance of the player. So the top team in the league, and I don't have to bury the lead here, we will be discussing McKinnon, the top team in the league who relies so heavily on a player who is just a ridiculous dynamo at every single location on the ice. He does anything and everything, puts up a ton of goals. He's leading the league in goals. So like that to me screams MVP. A team is incredibly successful, and they owe a lot of that success to this one guy. Now, there's a flip side of that, of like, yeah, but what about Necas? You know, what about Makar? What about these other guys on the Avalanche? And that's a great argument too. And then there's the guys who, like, this team would be at the bottom of the league if not for this one dude, and that's the Celebrini argument. So I think you can look at this in different ways, but this isn't an Art Ross race. This isn't going to be whoever ends up with the most points is the MVP. That to me is silliness. This is what team owes their success the most to this specific player. That's sort of how I'm viewing it.
I think that's fair. I think there's a question over how important is making the playoffs, because you already mentioned Celebrini. And there's some other guys too that are not like guaranteed to make the playoffs. And we recognize, 2-3 weeks left in the season, a lot can change. Some of these guys we're going to talk about are probably not going to make the playoffs. How much does that actually matter? Again, versus like, well, if you remove Macklin, Celebrini, San Jose is probably a bottom 5 team in the league right now. What does he have? Double the amount of points as the next guy on his team?
Right.
I think it's exactly that, versus Will Smith, I think, is just under 50 points right now. So how much does that come into play? Look, I initially drew a hard line of, no, you need to be in a playoff spot. And then the more I went down it, it was like, okay, I can't do that. But I do wonder if I discount you a little bit if you're not making the playoffs. Like, I can still see the value to your team, but this is a regular season most valuable player award. Success in the regular season is defined whether it's to me, it's mostly binary of like, you make the playoffs or you don't. So you can provide a lot of value, but if you ultimately don't get over that line and qualify for the playoffs, how much value did you really provide? So I went back and forth on like, Should they make the playoffs? Should they not make the playoffs? Ultimately, like, it's a consideration, but no one got disqualified because they're not going to make the playoffs. But it's something that matters. And if you're able to push your team a little bit over the hump, where you're more likely to make the playoffs, and I recognize the massive East-West imbalance this year is clouding that for a lot of candidates in the East.
Right.
That's kind of where I landed on that. Two players specifically I wanted to drill in on who are not top 5 guys, but I think hovering on the fringes of the top 10. That's Leon Draisaitl and Quinn Hughes. I think are both very interesting cases. So Leon Draisaitl, before he went down, was top 5 in the league in points. And I mean, he's probably still hovering all the way up there. Like, he's been passed by the 3 big guys. But beyond that, I think Celebrini just passed him. So he's probably in 5th right now, actually. Yeah, he's still hanging around in 5th.
Yeah.
But he's missed now the last 7-8 games. He's not going to play the biggest games down the stretch. He'll have still played 65 games. And then the other guy is Quinn Hughes, who gets traded a third of the way through the season. What do you do about his time in Vancouver? Like, did you provide any value at that point of the season? Because you got traded and that team's finishing last and it was bad when you were there. And in that sense, are you just counting the 40 plus games plus whatever 10 is left that is played in Minnesota? So I throw those two guys to you, Brian, because I think there's some unique cases of some of the best players in the league. There's no doubt about that. But how was their Hart Trophy candidacy affected by their unique circumstances?
That's a really good question. I feel crappy penalizing a guy who got hurt in the case of Draisaitl. Like, you never, how many times have we said this? You never hope for injuries for any player on your team or the opposition or rival, anything. It sucks. It's just awful. So it feels really crappy to discount what Draisaitl did in the first 3 quarters or more of the season because he's out now. But by the same token, longevity in terms of playing an entire season, there's value in that. This is the most valuable player. Would Nick Suzuki be seen as such a valuable guy if he was missing 10 to 15 games a year and getting hurt? And I know how crappy that sounds, but I think even if it's like a 5% decrease, there has to be something that accounts for that. And then in the case of Quinn Hughes, I think that's a different story. You can almost look at the success of the team prior to his arrival and then the success of the team after his arrival. And that's enough of the story here. It's not his fault that he was on a just abysmal Vancouver team. And then he looked good enough to get traded. So there's that. You could view it from that optics viewpoint as well, of like, this is how good Quinn Hughes was, that even on a terrible team, he had enough value to trade a lot for him. So I don't know. I think you can still include these guys in the discussion, but both of them also, by extension of that, have other dudes who could enter this discussion too on their current teams. You know, Kaprizov and Hughes are on the same team. A little guy by the name of Connor McDavid is on the same team as Leon Draisaitl. So there's also the element of like, those guys were not doing it alone either. So for Draisaitl, it's a combination of he's hurt right now, so he's not contributing. And also McDavid has been unbelievable. And then by the same token, like, Quinn Hughes has been sick, but he's got Kaprizov too, who's been really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on the Draisaitl front of my long list is about 23 players long. And, you know, taking aside any goalies I put in here, it's 25 players long. The 23 skaters he's going to end up playing the least amount of games. Now, it's still 65, and basically everyone else will have played at least 70 when all is said and done. How much that matters, I don't know. The Hughes thing to me is like, it's tough because like those first 6-8 weeks in Vancouver, I either count them as a complete zero, or it could honestly also be viewed as a negative because you were the captain of a team and you got traded. So you inherently did not provide any value in that time. So like, I'll go with the former rather than the latter. It's a bit more forgiving of like, I'm just not counting it. So I'm counting your current 42 games that you've played for the Minnesota Wild. Ultimately, he's not in my top 10, so it doesn't really matter. But I do wonder, a 70 game season for Quinn Hughes in Minnesota would certainly, I think I mentioned it earlier. He's playing 28 minutes a night in Minnesota. Like, I'm sorry, that's junior numbers, man. Like, where you have guys playing 30, 31 minutes a night. And that's a bit of a trend we've seen with a lot of these defensemen, man, cranking 25, 26, 27 minutes a night. There's been a bit of a shift I find recently. Like, coaches are really pushing it. And part of it is like these guys that play 3-4 minutes on the power play every day or every game that certainly helps. And that's where you see like Werenski is all the way up there. Even like Matthew Schaefer's closing in on 25 minutes a night. And it helps when your power play won. But anyways, those two guys to me were a bit unique. Neither for me, I'll say, are in my top 10. Draisaitl was closer than Hughes was. Okay. Let's start from 1 and make our way down. Brian, I'll let you go first. And I'm presuming your number 1 will be somewhere on my list. I'll just let you know where it is. And then we can either dive into it or start some debate. So who was your currently, 72, 73, 74 games in, your leading candidate for the Hart Trophy?
Call me an unchanging doofus who never changes his mind about anything, but Nathan MacKinnon is the most important player in this league. He's the best player. He's the most valuable player. He's the player who, no matter what situation the Avalanche find themselves in, if they're defending a lead, which tends to be the case more often than not, if they're tied, or if they have to get a goal, who's going out there? Usually it's Nathan MacKinnon. And so I have him in the 1 spot.
Okay. It was really this is the one I probably went back and forth on the most, was MacKinnon versus McDavid, but it wasn't for number 1. It was for number 3. So I had ended up putting Nathan MacKinnon 4th.
Holy crow. Okay.
I gave a slight edge to McDavid.
Okay.
It's tough. Look, I mean, Nathan MacKinnon, I was just looking at the stat. I think he's tied for 7th in best single season plus minus since 1990. He's a plus 55. And I know plus minus is silly, but like, it's not by, like, you look at the names on that list, it's not an accident. It's that silly. Which, by the way, if you're a Calgary Flames fan, don't check that, because the 22 team with Gaudreau and Tkachuk and Elias Lindholm is there. So don't look there, because you'll get sad. So I think the top 4 for me is like very, very close. And with McDavid, MacKinnon with my 3-4 being the closest. I mean, MacKinnon's still leading the Rocket Richard Trophy race. He is still playing, 22 minutes a night. The power play is not great. The whole Central, by the way, and we'll get into Dallas at some point, I'm sure. But the whole Central is kind of cooled off. And I don't know if those teams are just like, there's no point in killing ourselves these last 30 games. So we all know where we're going to finish: first, second, third, Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota. So maybe that's part of it, but it just seems like they've all kind of downshifted back into like 3rd and 4th gear. Whereas, other teams like Edmonton, like Connor McDavid doesn't have a choice right now. He has to be going full tilt. And maybe that's just, and I know you'll make the argument of like the games in October matter as much as the games in March and April. Sure. But the pressure is stronger in March and April. It's not their fault. And MacKinnon might truthfully be the favorite right now, but I had him 4th.
Okay.
But again, so it's really tight, really tight.
Oh, of course it's really tight. And we'd be remiss to not mention the next guy I have, who's Nikita Kucherov, at least in my 2 spot. And the last sort of clinching factor, at least for me, putting MacKinnon above Kucherov, when you look at 5-on-5 specifically. When you look at 5-on-5 points, MacKinnon has 70, Kucherov has 65, Scheifele has 57, and then it just continues to drop from there. And in terms of goals, he's number 1 in 5-on-5 goals as well. Tage Thompson actually is right behind him, and so is our boy Cole Caulfield, 29 and 28 respectively. So I'm also, like, when you ask me how do you base the Hart, I'm putting a lot of stock in 5-on-5 play specifically. That's how most of the game is played. And when you have a good 5-on-5 team, yes, the special teams come into play, but it's really hard to beat, especially like a Colorado Avalanche juggernaut team, when their best player is the best player on the ice at 5-on-5 in the entire league.
Yeah, no, it's again, it's splitting hairs. So I had painfully, I have to say, I had Nikita Kucherov at number 1.
Fair enough. Look, we both hate him, but you can't argue with the results and the play.
Yeah, and it's not only just that. It's the fact that Braden Point's missed 20 games. Anthony Cirelli's missed another dozen games. Victor Hedman's missed half the season. And he is just, I know he started off quite slow, and the run he's been on of basically 2 points per game for the past 40 games, it's unreal. So I gave him the edge. Vasilevsky is not in my top 10, but he was a consideration. Like, he is right there with him, kind of pulling those guys, and them being passed by Buffalo does kind of matter. Like, I think there's a much stronger case for Kucherov if they still finish first in the Atlantic, because then you're saying some of our best players either had a down year, an injured year, or both. And Andrei Vasilevsky and Nikita Kucherov said, we don't care. We are dragging you guys to 108 points and first in the Atlantic. Now, the first in the Atlantic part part might not be happening, but it's 40 goals, it's 81 assists, and I couldn't fight it too long. Well, let's keep going. I also just don't want to spend that much time on Kucherov. Okay,
Fair enough. Okay, so can you give me, just to summarize, give me your top 4 there.
Kucherov 1, Zach Werenski 2, Connor McDavid 3, Nathan MacKinnon 4.
Very cool. Okay, Werenski is an excellent choice. I have him in the 4 spot.
Okay.
So it's basically the same 4 guys, just in a drastically different order.
Yeah. So we both had McDavid 3 then.
Exactly.
Okay, so cool. Okay, so we have and I think this is fair. We have the exact same top 4. This is what I fully expected. I would not be shocked if our number 5 is bang on. But let's just do quickly with Werenski. I had 2, you had 4. He's the best player on his team by a mile. He's playing 26 and a half minutes per night. They rely on him at every single step. And this is a like making the playoffs versus not making the playoffs. Like he was the main guy I was really thinking about, less so Celebrini, but it was really Werenski of like, man, if this team, like we've talked about in the past, right? Like 97 points is the cutoff. If you get 97 points historically, you always make the playoffs. I think this year is going to be the first time that happens where you have a 98 or 99 point team in the East and you're not going to make the playoffs. And like, is like what happens if Columbus finishes with 98 in their 9th? Like, how does that impact it when it's like, this is just a stacked Eastern Conference? And then on the flip side, what if they get 101 and they're finishing 3rd or 2nd in the Metro? So like team results do matter a bit here, especially when we're splitting hairs. So I am maybe projecting a bit of like, I think Columbus is going to safely be in one of either the 2 or the 3 Metro slot. And that maybe his ranking gets affected and drops to 3 or 4. I mean, same goes with McDavid, right? Like if Edmonton somehow fall down, I mean, they would have to fall all the way out of the playoffs. Obviously, he's not 3rd. He would fall down McKinnon. So like there's some projecting going on here. So I had Werenski 2, you had him 4. Again, I think kind of all in the same tier, these guys, right?
Pretty much. I think definitely there are some, if you research. So I made my list prior to looking at anybody else's stuff online just because I didn't want to be influenced. But then as I was looking online, the talk was the top 3 of like, usually Kucherov was what I was seeing in the 1, then McKinnon, then McDavid, in some order, those 3, and then a chasm, and then Celebrini, and then Werenski. And I sort of thought that was crazy. Like when I put this together, Werenski was solidly in the top 4. At no point was he above the top 3, but I couldn't put him in the next tier, at least in my own brain. He's sort of in the tier with the next guy that I'll go to. So the fact that everybody is so down on him, like there are some lists that don't have Werenski in the top like 7 or 8. He's in like the 10th spot. And I'm going like, how do you put the best defenseman in the league this year? And look, maybe that's debatable, but you cannot argue that he's not the most important defenseman to his team. Because as you said, playing the amount of time that he's playing, the responsibilities that he's given, and the fact that he's that much better than the next closest guy on his team, how do you not give it to Werenski in the 4th spot or better as you put him in the 2?
Yeah. Look, he's missed a couple games, so he's a little bit lower down. I mean, Kucherov as well. They've both missed 6-7 games. It's not that much, really. It's, I mean, it's the Hart Trophy, right? There's a huge bias towards forwards here. And I certainly made sure that my list did not reflect that it wasn't 9 forwards and 1 defenseman getting a token spot. That I tried to balance it out a little bit more because, believe it or not, these defensemen are playing 3, 4, 5 minutes a game more than the forwards are. And they often have more difficult roles, power play, penalty kill. So yeah, not having Werenski in a top 4 to me is kind of asinine, and you're kind of telling on yourself with. And I know there's some guys who say like, I'll never vote a goalie for the Hart Trophy, even though Connor Hellebuck's won, Carey Price has won. I think Elliot Friedman's been one of the main guys saying that, like they have their own award. Forwards have a lot of awards, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
They have the Art Ross and the Rocket. They also have the Selke, and unofficially, for the most part, the Lady Being goes to a forward. So to say that like goalies have the Vezina and defensemen have the Norris, which is not totally true. Offensive defensemen have the Norris.
You're right.
That the Hart we should include all different parties. Anyways, cool. Okay, let's keep moving because we've only done the top 4 and we're starting to run long.
Yeah,
I'm guessing we both had Macklin Celebrini at number 5.
Yeah, it gets hard when you get to that point to not be like, Celebrini is dragging his team out of the mud. Yeah. He's not the only guy. They have a bunch of really cool, very skilled and fun to watch forwards. Just none of them are at the level yet that Celebrini is at. And Celebrini is quickly turning into one of the primo players in the entire league. We saw it at the Olympics. We're still seeing it with the way that he's playing for San Jose. So how do you not put him in the top 5?
Exactly. He's doubled Will Smith, who's missed time, but he's doubling Will Smith, who's number 2 on the team in points, which I believe that's the biggest chasm. It's about 49 points ahead. Kucherov is something around 40, 45 points ahead of, I think it's Jake Gensel. So like there's a similar chasm in Tampa Bay, but it's bigger in San Jose. San Jose's there, like where it gets discounted for me and why he wasn't in the top tier was like, it's a worse team. It's a worse conference. If this was a regular balanced season, like San Jose would be way out. But like, if we're just talking like most outstanding player, he's absolutely in a top 10, top 5, definitely. Him being below the other 4 guys because the other 4 guys are on better teams, and he's not. But it doesn't mean he's like, this is the gear up season, and I think the first time these guys make the playoffs, he'll be top 3 in a heartbeat. Okay, this is where it gets wild. Like I was convinced, Brian, our top 5 would have no disagreements. The order, sure, but I thought the 5 guys were pretty standard. Honestly, 6 to 10, like maybe we'll have 2 guys the same. Like I think it's completely open. Again, I have like 15 guys written down. I have picked who the 6 through 10 are. So let's go through it if you don't mind. Who was your how do you want to do this? You want to just run 6 through 10?
We can. I mean, I kind of want to frame it like this just because 6 was fascinating for me. The first 5 I ran through in 3 minutes and I was like, yep, that's settled. And then 6, I went through about 10 different guys before I was happy with it. There's the goaltending discussion between Sorokin, between Thompson, between Swayman. There's a bunch of defensemen that enter the fray right now. There's a couple of guys on Buffalo that I was like, well, I have to include Buffalo somewhere, but which one is it? And that's what ultimately led me to Sorokin as the choice, because it was either going to be, at least for me, it was going to be Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin, Vasilevsky, Swayman, Thompson. And then I was like, well, let me just take the best goalie because I'm tired of thinking about it. So Ilya Sorokin, he leads the entire league in goals saved above expected per 60 for goalies who have played more than 28 games. And that's because Devin Cooley's played 27. Holy crap, this kid's going to be good. But Sorokin, if you look at his team, and this is classic New York Islanders, this is classic Habs from like 8 years ago. They don't have a single point per game player. They don't have anybody who's close. Barzal has 65 points in 73 games. Whatever. You can maybe call that close. Then it drops to Matthew Schaefer, who's incredible. So maybe he should be in this discussion too. But then it just keeps dropping from there. And this is not a team who produces a lot of goals, but it's a team who's second right now in their division, and a team who, if not for Ilya Sorokin, would be nowhere near it. So I had to put Sorokin in the 6th spot.
Well, I mean, I hate how similar we are. I also had Ilya Sorokin 6th. So
lame.
I had all the same notes. The 7 shutouts is wild. It's him. Yeah, it's Schaefer's on my long list. He's not in the top 10, but I had to write him down and give some thought. But it's Ilya Sorokin with a bullet for number 6. That became more and more clear to me, or the more I thought about it, that he is at the top of this tier very much. Okay, so this was a little boring. I thought we'd really get some wacky stuff. And you already mentioned at least one guy you already mentioned my number 7. I'm curious where he landed. I'll jump into that then. It was Rasmus Dahlin.
Yep, same thing.
Oh, come on.
We suck.
Okay, so listen.
I really thought this was going to be a heated debate the whole way through, but I guess not.
Yes, we were really helping out the listener here. Listen, 17 goals, 50 assists. He's been an absolute animal, playing 24 and a half minutes a night on the best team in the Eastern Conference. He is their best player. Now, there's a lot of guys. I wrote down Tage Thompson as well. Like, he is on the big list of like, okay, yeah, like I'm certainly not going to disregard a guy who's going to put up 40-40. But the more you look at it, the more you realize like it's the captain, it's the guy leading them the whole way. They lean on him in so many different aspects. And also, like, I don't know how much this really matters, but he has had a pretty tumultuous personal experiences this year. I believe it's his partner had surgery, and that was very touch and go for a while. And she was at a game recently, and that was like, there's a really cool shot of like her in whatever, the seat that she's in, and they show her, and they have a camera on Dahlin, and Dahlin's like game mode. And then he hears people cheering, and he looks up to the screen and he sees her and he just smiles. It was just really touching.
Right.
But very much he was like, I'm a killer, I'm a killer, I'm a killer. I'm like, oh no, I like that person. Okay, I'm back to being a killer.
Right.
It was really sweet. So Darlene 7, Buffalo needed credit. I guess we'll keep going. Speaking of teams that we have to give credit to, 8 and 9, I put Miro Heiskanen and Wyatt Johnson. Please tell me there's some disagreement coming now.
Wow. Okay, fascinating. Robertson was the closest for me on that team.
Yeah. So there needed to be some credit given to the Dallas guys, and I was just like racking my brain. Jason Robertson, obviously written down. If anything, he's one of the first cuts. My Draisaitl was the guy that ended up being just outside the 10, but Robertson was probably right around the corner. Heiskanen, maybe this is me again trying to be like, we need to make sure we're like recognizing how amazing defensemen are in this league, because we always think about the forwards. And I know you brought up, or at least I thought you brought up earlier, maybe Mark Scheifele, although I might be misremembering because you hate him. But you've brought up Kaprizov. We talked about Robertson. We haven't mentioned Pasternak's name yet, but like he should be in the conversation.
Yeah.
Miro Heiskanen, he gets a slight edge over Wyatt Johnson. Like, I don't know why I decided that. Maybe it's the plus 14 versus the -1. Maybe it's the 26 minutes a night versus 20 minutes a night. But that's just such a balanced team. And it's one that no one's talked about this year because the first place team was on a heater for 40 games. And the third place team in that division, the Wild, made the big trade. And everyone was like, oh my God, look at them loading up. Meanwhile, Dallas is just stuck in between a rock and a hard place. But they're like, no, we got our guys. We're cool. We have our people. And, Mikko Rantanen has been a little bit banged up this year. They haven't really missed a beat with that. And they're going to be hosting the Wild in the first round. So I put, Heiskanen 8, Johnson 9. I'm happy there's finally some disagreement.
Those are two great picks. The difficulty I had with Dallas is just too many dudes. Like I artificially or not, I ended up with a list with no repeats. Like I really wanted to put Vasilevsky in there, and I was like, you know what? I gave Kucherov. Let's leave it at that. So I did have Robertson in the 10 spot.
Okay.
Robertson ended up being my 10. So just to give the Dallas Stars their due, but like again, it was sort of Robertson, Johnston, Heiskanen, all sort of in that conversation between 10 and 15. Somewhere around there. So you've got one left to declare, which is your 10. I have my 8, 9.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 8, 9, I know you're going to disagree. Probably with both of these. In the 8 spot, actually, I'm going to do the 9 first because I've been saving this. In the 9 spot is Moritz Seider.
Oh, he's my 10.
Is he? Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, then we don't disagree. I'm very glad then, because now I think he would be higher up here. He would be probably battling Sorokin, Dahlin for me, and my guy in the 8, if the Red Wings hadn't fallen off the cliff and are now not firmly, but like scarily out of a playoff spot. And if they don't figure it out soon, the Sens and the Jackets are on something of a tear. The Bruins have been playing well. So I just thought it was too difficult to exclude him, despite the fact that the Red Wings are not in the spot that they were in prior. He's another one of these dudes who just plays a ton of minutes. He's almost at 26 minutes a night. He does anything and everything on the list. He's second on his team in assists behind Lucas Raymond, who's just too sick. And he's a plus 22 on a team who, and I didn't look at this prior, but it's just occurring to me, I should check what their plus minus is. So they're -2 and he's plus 22. So there's something to be said for that. And he leads his team in that category by a giant leap. Lucas Raymond is next at plus 10.
Can I just quickly ask a question here? Because this is what I've been thinking about and why I put Heiskanen at 8, Seider at 10. Defensive defenseman. Who would you rather have?
Moritz Seider.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think I'd rather Seider.
So
that's not to say that Heiskanen isn't amazing, but
no.
What Seider's doing, being surrounded by less defensively sound players, I think is impressive.
Yeah, I think that's again kind of where like the team success comes in here, right? Like in terms of season on season, Seider's probably having one of the Seider should probably be a Norris candidate, really. Whether that happens or not,
yes.
Again, the voters tend to really just look at points. So I think we're going to expect, we'd never said Cale Makar's name in this, but I'm going to presume it's going to be Werenski, Makar, Hughes as the 3 finalists. I'm sure Lane Hudson will get some votes. Evan Bouchard, who we also haven't mentioned, but it was written on my list, will probably also get some votes. Moritz Seider should probably be nominated at least because he hits everything that moves. He's really good on the penalty kill, and he still contributes. He's put up 53 points so far this season. So
Right.
yeah, I'm happy we both had Moritz Seider on the fringes. The team slowly doing what it usually does, sadly, in March and April is affecting it. Same goes, I had written down Dylan Larkin too. I was like, I can't get there because, it's someone's going to fall out of favor in the East. And if it's Detroit, that hurts both those guys.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. And so we're coming to my last pick, my number 8, and I will just sort of declare this. If you want, I'll remove this guy because we did have a stipulation, no Habs.
Yeah,
because we're gonna talk about the Habs later. So I'm gonna say who's in the 8 spot for me, and I won't talk about it much. Maybe a couple things. For me, it's Lane Hudson in the 8 spot. It's not Nick Suzuki, as you may have thought. It's not Cole Caulfield, as you may have thought. It's actually Lane Hudson. But for keeping that out of the discussion, I think if you were to bump Seider and Robertson up to 8-9 for me, it would be between 2 Bruins, likely for the next spot. It would likely be between Swayman and Pasternak for the 10. But let me talk on Lane Hudson for about 8 seconds. 5-on-5 assists. He leads the entire league among defensemen, above Bouchard, above Dahlin, above Hughes, all these guys, above Werenski that we've talked about a ton. And his advanced analytics for when he's on the ice versus not on the ice for the Canadiens is unspeakably good. So I had to throw in Lane Hudson, if not for bias alone.
Yeah, so usually we have our Habsland MVP at the end of the season, and all I can say is I think we're going to have a very spirited debate because that's not the player that I was slowly rating in my notes that I thought you were referencing.
I figured as such, and I chose to negate recency bias because, like you said, Hudson, 2 points in his last 5 games. That's not the Lane Hudson we know and love. He slipped below point per game, which, who cares? He's still damn close to it. But yeah, that'll be a spirited debate. And these last 10 games, I think, are going to clinch it one way or another. Because if I had said Suzuki, I don't think you would have been surprised. If I had said Caulfield, I don't think you would have been surprised. Those 3 guys, I think, have almost equal opportunity to be the most valuable player for the Canadiens. And I cannot wait for that discussion at the end of the year.
Yep. And we hope that's in like mid-June, right? So we'll see.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Just to go through the long list, I think I've mentioned most guys already, but other considerations: Draisaitl, Pasternak, Bouchard, Kaprizov, DeBrincat, Caulfield, Boldy, Suzuki, Thompson, Makar, Schaefer, Faber, Hughes, and obviously Andrei Vasilevsky. That was the everybody list for me. So interestingly, Brian and I had the exact same top 7, where 1 through 4 was kind of we viewed as one tier, and we mixed that up. 5, 6, and 7 we had bang on. We didn't disagree at all, sadly. And then 8, 9, and 10, that's when we kind of spread the ball around. We got some stars in there. We both had Moritz Seider, and then we moved a couple things around. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff for, I think this is a more fun exercise to do as a top 10 than as a top 5. The voting is a top 5, so you won't get those fun debates, I think, with like Dahlin probably will get a couple 5th place votes. Same will probably go for Sorokin, but largely speaking, it'll be the 5 guys we mentioned at the beginning of McDavid, Werenski, Kucherov, Celebrini, and McKinnon in some order or another. Hopefully that, Werenski's in there, but I'm happy we went with our list and our top 10. We got to talk about some guys we don't usually get to talk about. We don't get to talk about teams out west that much. So good times all around, Brian. With that, I think we'll wrap up the episode there. You can follow us on social media at HabslandPod. And if you like what you hear, please leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Until next Monday, go Habs.